Welcome to another episode of the Here We Go podcast. I'm your host, Trent Ging. Today, I want to talk about something that kind of got into a conversation on X last night. Had a discussion with somebody I respect, somebody I've grown to know. We're talking about target share. So, a lot of this kind of goes off of the premise that Arthur Smith's offense doesn't need a true number two receiver. I don't think it's a secret to say that Pat Freiermuth is going to be much, much more involved this season than maybe at any point in his career so far in Pittsburgh. But who's going to get a lot of the receptions that Deontay Johnson had? Is it going to be Freiermuth now? Is it going to be Roman Wilson? Is it going to be one of the many guys we brought in to compete with Calvin Austin for the wide receiver 2 spot or a wide receiver 4 spot? I'm going to dive into that right now because I found something he said very, very intriguing. So the obvious starting point is that George Pickens likely has the most targets on the team this year. They're going to try to get him involved early and often in the games. They're going to try to keep him engaged. And they're really going to probably try to inflate his ego to make sure he feels real good so we don't see some of these sideline tantrums that we've seen in the past. Of all the things that I like about George Pickens, some of the things that I saw last year from a maturity standpoint was one of the things that really bothered me a lot. But he's going to be the bona fide number one in this offense. And I don't expect them to make any kind of a major move at receiver. I've talked about that enough that, honestly, you kind of get sick of talking about it. Like, I've talked about it ad nauseum. So it's pretty clear this team's going to go into the season with George Pickens being their number one. He's going to get the majority of the targets. The biggest question that'll be answered, as I've said before, is how does he fare against double teams? Do we have another person emerge that can take some of that pressure off of him? So his final catch totals are going to be, in my opinion, more of a factor based on the fact that we need someone to take some pressure off of him. So I could easily see him ending up with 85 catches this year. Behind him, I think the second person on that list is another guy that's going to be pretty undisputed as the second guy on the list. It's Pat Freiermuth. Arthur Smith wants to utilize the tight ends, and he wants Pat Freiermuth to be more of a move tight end. Now, when I did my breakdown of the tight end room, I said that I'm not convinced he's athletic enough to do that. But I will say this, it won't matter because he's the second best receiver on the team right now. They're going to get him involved. They're going to get him the ball. They're going to find new ways, creative ways to get that done. I don't know if he can start to create any more yards after catch than what he's done in the past. I mean, he led the team in 2022 in YAC, but he's not exactly Travis Kelce. So you shouldn't expect him to have a lot. He's more of a possession type guy. So there's not going to be a lot of yards after catch. It's just going to be, can he break some tackles to get forward enough to really make it more of a little bit more than just a straight possession receiver type guy. He is good at finding zones. He is good at his hands are pretty good. I've never seen him truly just drop an easy pass. I mean, there's a lot to feel comfortable about, I think, with Pat Freiermuth being the number 2. But he's certainly not what I would say is a receiving tight end. He's also definitely not a blocking tight end. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I just think it's very easy to say that he's going to be the number 2 in target share. But beyond the first 2, the waters start to get a little muddied. Now, they drafted Roman Wilson in the 3rd round. But we all know Coach Tomlin does not like putting rookies into a starting role right away. He's going to have to this year on the offensive line. Probably having 2 of them guys starting. But I don't think he's going to feel that he needs to start Roman Wilson. So I think Roman Wilson is going to be the starter in the slot. And a lot of times teams will list the slot receiver as a starter on their depth chart anyway. But honestly, the slot receiver in Pittsburgh is not going to be a starter. Darnell Washington is going to be the other starter. We're on a lot of 12 personnel. You're going to see a lot of Freiermuth and Washington on the field together, which means Roman Wilson isn't going to be on the field nearly as much as most teams' slot receivers in the NFL. So who's going to be the 3rd guy? Is it going to be the starting wide receiver too? I don't think so. I think Jaylen Warren is your 3rd option on this team. We saw last year, one of the big knocks on Russell Wilson was that he didn't really throw the ball past the line of scrimmage. I mean, let's just be honest. It wasn't that he was throwing short to intermediate passes. He wasn't throwing the ball past the line of scrimmage a lot last year. His average air targets weren't, I mean, you're talking bottom of the league type stuff. Take that into consideration with an Arthur Smith offense where you're going to expect to run more play action type stuff. You're going to throw the ball out of a 12 personnel. Like I said, you're going to run a lot of 12 personnel. So you're going to throw the ball out of that a lot. That's going to make the running back a nice, easy target. Couple that with the fact that Jaylen Warren is just so good with the ball in his hands, especially in the open field. He is phenomenal at making things happen once he's got the ball in his hands in open field. I mean, of all the things he does well running the ball, converting first downs when he gets the ball dumped off to him and it's 3rd and 8, I mean, maybe some of the most surprising stuff he did all of last year. And people are going to say, yeah, that inflated some of his numbers because it was 3rd and 8 so many times. It don't matter. He still converted it. Most guys don't. So they're going to want to keep him involved. And when you're looking at a true split in that backfield, because I 100% believe there's going to be a 50-50 split in carries. If it's not 50-50, I actually am going to be in the minority saying that I believe Najee Harris is going to get the 60-40 advantage in carries. I actually think Arthur Smith's offense is going to cater to Najee's strengths more so than Jaylen Warren. But I also think Jaylen Warren is the type of guy who's capable of running behind any offense, any scheme, I should say. I mean, if you can run behind the offensive line with the success he's had last year, and a Matt Canada system that was just god awful, the guy can probably run behind anything in any scheme. But I do question how much of a workload they give him because of his. Again, it's more of his build than his actual physical height and weight. I just the body type doesn't look like a body type who's going to be a workhorse and last through the season, which is why I've said in the past that I think Najee and Jalen both need each other. So I really think Jalen's going to be your number 3 target guy. And I'm not sure that's going to surprise a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of people that probably disagree with that. But if you really think about Russell Wilson's deficiencies from last season, I think it makes perfect sense that he's the number 3. Now, number 4 is where I really thought things got interesting. Flip Fisher put Najee Harris as the 4th guy on the team in targets. Now, I didn't necessarily agree with that, but it was intriguing that he believes, and he's a guy who does a ton of research, and he really looks into the analytics, the advanced metrics of football. And so it was intriguing to me that he put Najee Harris behind Jaylen Warren in target share. And maybe the Steelers do want to get him more involved in the passing game. I mean, this team is really going to be built around the running backs, which is so ass backwards than what the rest of the league's doing, but this is what we're doing. So from a certain standpoint, it actually makes sense. I never actually thought about it until he brought it up last night. But if you think back to Najee's rookie season, they wanted to get that guy the ball in every situation possible. And getting 240 pounds, or if he's lost a little bit of weight this offseason, 235, 230 pounds out in the open space against smaller defenders, guys start making business decisions in those situations. Because Najee's a load when he gets moving. So I actually want to see, I'm not sure if we're going to see, but I want to see the screen game a lot more involved this year than what we've seen in years past. And the reason I say that is it's been effective throughout all of football, number 1. Number 2, what have we been drafting on the offensive line? Outside of Zach Frazier, who is not quite as mobile as a lot of other guys, he's still not like a brick statue who can't move like a, Nate Herbig. He's adequate, but you got Broderick Jones, who's a very athletic tackle. You went and got Troy Falatanu, who has elite athleticism for a tackle. James Daniels can move. He's got athleticism. Seumalo can move. I think the screen game should be incorporated more this year. And if they do, this is where I could actually see Flip being right. It takes a lot of pressure off a 35-year-old quarterback. It's going to get the ball out of his hands. It'll limit turnovers, limit sacks. And it gets these athletic big men out in space. And if Najee Harris is out in space with them, I would not want to be a DB in those situations because you're going to get lit up. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Now, I'm not 100% sure that I still agree with Flip, but the thought was very intriguing to me, and I didn't disagree with him because I'm not going to say he's wrong. I don't feel strongly enough about Russell Wilson or Arthur Smith's offense to say that he's going to be wrong. The thing that I did reply back to is I'd be highly disappointed in drafting Roman Wilson in the third round, I should say, if he's not even going to be fourth on this team in target share. I mean, that to me would seem a little crazy. But again, this team's going to be built to utilize running backs. And I know, so maybe crazy is exactly what we're going to be this year. I actually had Roman Wilson fourth on this list because I think they're going to want to utilize his skill set. I think they're going to want to use a lot of motion with him to get him moving, to get him away from potential press coverage. And he's going to be one of the biggest deep threats on this team. And of course, Russell Wilson's strength is to utilize that fantastic moonball of his. So I actually think Roman Wilson's going to end up third on this list in target share because I also think as the season progresses, he's going to make a push to be the wide receiver 2 when we're in 12 personnel, and then he's going to move back into the slot, in my opinion, when we're in obvious passing situations. And I say that because I think Calvin Austin is going to be the true wide receiver 2 on the team. But this dude can't be in the game when it's obvious running situations. He's not going to be able to block anybody. And it's not for lack of effort. I mean, the guy's willing to get in there and try, but I mean, dude, he's 170 pounds soaking wet. I mean, he's smaller than pretty much every defensive back in the league. But I did have Calvin Austin fifth on my list. Just because I do think he wins the starting job in camp. And I call it the hype on Calvin Austin. I don't know. I feel like if the reports are true that he has really started to figure out route running and he can utilize his speed, and again, guys that are really, really fast that learn how to change tempo in their routes, that keep defensive backs on their heels. I mean, those are the smaller guys who succeed in this league. So I think Calvin Austin, from the reports that, and it's been from like everyone, it's not even just one person here or another person there. It's everyone who's shown up to OTAs and minicamp saying Calvin Austin looks like a totally different receiver. So I think he becomes a little bit more than a gadget guy this year. And to be perfectly honest with you, if that guy can really figure things out completely, maybe he's the guy who can help take some pressure off of George Pickens. And then if you have him and Roman Wilson on the field together, two guys with blazing speed that are both deep threats, then you can start working George underneath a little bit and take some of the pressure, some of the double teams away so that he can start finding success. I mean, this thing's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But again, the point of this was just that I found it so intriguing that he really felt like Najee Harris is going to be the fourth guy, and I can't dispute it. Now, as fans, I think we're going to feel a lot more comfortable once we see who wins out in this wide receiver 2 role. We're going to be a lot more informed on what we should expect as we see Arthur Smith's offense going in camp, going in preseason, to see how he utilizes some of these different players. No matter how you slice it, the wide receiver 2 in Pittsburgh is going to be the worst wide receiver 2 in the NFL. The question becomes, can that wide receiver 2 be enough to take some pressure off George Pickens? We don't need him to be the best. This is why I've talked about the Brandon Ayuk trade so many times, is we don't need 2 stud receivers in Arthur Smith's offense. We need somebody who's just good enough to take pressure off George Pickens, who can be a threat, but a guy who's going to catch maybe 40 balls this whole season. So we'll see how this thing plays out. I just thought it was an interesting exercise. It's a Saturday morning. I'm headed into work, a little bored. So I thought I'd throw this out there. This one's probably not the most informative video that I've thrown out so far, but I just thought it was a fun little exercise that we did last night. And it was, like I said, it just brought up some intrigue thinking about Najee Harris being 4th on this team in target share. So I definitely want to know what people think about this one, because, like I said, this one could go a number of different ways as the season plays on. But let me know your thoughts. So throw me some comments, like and share the videos, subscribe to the content so you can see more as I post. And as always, have a great day.